This lecture is being brought to you in part by the generous gifts of these sponsors.
Well, and I won 2 modesty awards too, just so you know. That just looks like work, doesn't it? That's what you have to do now when you don't have a GoPro. You have to take the big cameras out. That weighs about 68, 70 pounds. The camera lens is $85,000. I don't own it, so don't rob the house. And it is a special camera that goes from 24 to 290 at 2.8 all the way out for those of you who are camera buffs. So literally we'd have bears fighting between me and you right there, going up, standing on their hind legs, and we'd be down on the ground filming. And you could get the whole animal in, and as he moved off, you could go tighten just his eyes and feet and legs. So you see these things at Geographic, so why my film doesn't look like theirs? I do have a slight correction. She was quoting off of a part of a story. I did not work with Jacques Cousteau on the SCUBA stuff. That was the person I worked under, which was Jordan Klein. And Jordan, as you know, has a nice brass plaque underneath the Marion Theater right now, right there on the front, and rightfully so. He won an Academy Award for inventing underwater housings and did a lot with SCUBA that very few people have ever done. And he lived right across the lake from us on Little Lake Weir. So I learned how to dive with him, worked 18 years with those guys off and on. And when I got to Geographic, it was easy compared to what they were up to. They were doing incredible things underwater. So I got to work with the Navy SEALs, lots of different groups, and that's how important Silver Springs is to all of us, is that a lot of people came through here to make their films, and so we got a lot of experience that I wouldn't have got even in LA or in New York working on films. So most of the films that we've done for Geographic and Discovery and the BBC, let me clear the decks a little bit before we get started on this. Sounds like a me kind of show, and it's not. This is really about our glass bottom boat guys out at Silver Springs. So as far as all this, I can't do anything by myself. We have a lot of other people help, and those of you who happen to be male here know that your wife also is extraordinarily valuable in these things. First, they have to believe that we can actually do some of these crazy things that we do. So my wife has been to Africa with me, 4 or 5 countries. She's been underground with alligators. We crawled into the dens with them. She's been to Cuba with me when Castro was still there. And we've been into Venezuela after Chavez took over and people pointed fully automatic weapons at us. So she's around the corner here. Give her a clap right now if you don't mind. Thank you. So what we're here tonight for is just that, and I wish they could have come, but Oscar Collins, Roosevelt Faison, Virginia Ferguson, and Leon Cheatham are our heroes tonight, and rightfully so. Luckily, they've all seen this. We put it on at the movie theater at Marion Theater, and it was a time when that was segregated, so it was really satisfying to me to have them all go see themselves on the big screen in a theater they couldn't go to when they were young. And we had a big night, had a party for 150 people, and brought all the food they wanted, and we took them on down there and had a great night, had a wonderful time. We're going to go through a little bit about how you can make a film like this for 1995, because that's kind of what we did. Geographic does not fund local films, but I wanted to do and honor these guys. When I was young and I didn't have a ride to work, Oscar came by, and I said, later I go, Oscar, what was it like for a black guy to pull up in a white neighborhood? And he said, Mark, that's why I met you out on 3rd Street. I wasn't going down in there. So the times were totally different, and so they were true friends, and they helped all of us out, and a lot of you in here know that. We all worked with them. They taught us how to drive glass-bottom boats first, and when you did that, you're running basically a Winnebago boat. It doesn't make any quick moves. You have to think ahead, and while you're doing all that, you're doing a spiel. You're doing a talk about all the nature and the wildlife around you. So it's a learned art. To do it properly and to do it smooth, Roosevelt had been there 62 years. And so we looked at the whole thing and go, these guys are all retiring. And I remember Ben Waller leaving us, and Ben was a great underwater cinematographer, archaeologist, and did a lot of great things. And we lost that story about Ben, and so I wasn't going to lose it with these guys. So I was in between films, and I kept just shooting all the time. I had to show up late at church a number of times, so I'd shoot, and then I'd come in and go run down to church and go get cleaned up a little bit and then go back out again. And so we just did that for 5 years off and on until we got what we needed to make this film. What we wanted to do was make this about what they loved. So there's no way to do 1 hour show on Silver Springs. Everybody here has a memory that would go, oh, but I remember this and that. How can you make that film? It needs to be 4 or 5 1 hours, and you're still going to have somebody say, yeah, but what about? And right? So we can't do that. So what about the guys who were there for collectively 200 years and spoke to 12 million, with my wife's college math, we think 12 million people. That's stunning, right? Who better for ambassadors for Ocala than people like that? So the idea was to use the skills that we used at Geographic and see if we could figure out how to do it. There's a guy standing up in the back with a plaid shirt. Everybody knows him as Big. That's David Lancaster. And David's daughter got me on GoFundMe. It started there. I rented Zeiss lenses from B&H in New York, and we used the best lenses we could, just like we'd use for this, to honor these guys. And so the film that we made took about, like say 4 or 5 years, but about a year we worked with the glass bottom boat drivers, periodically just going around and talking to those guys. And what we did was interview them on the boat. We didn't interview them in a room and all like you would for a Geographic film. We wanted to do it very naturally. And also when we shot this, we decided to shoot it cinematically. And cinematically means you're not gonna make the herky-jerky moves that they used to use for MTV and now they use it for everything else. It's not born supremacy, it's a glass bottom boat. It's moving along like that, right? So what we ended up doing was filming it that way. And so a lot of times it feels like you're almost looking through the window of a glass bottom boat at something as a deer goes by or something like that. And so when you see the film, hopefully it lasts longer that way. It was shot at, technical speak here, brief, 6K, that is 6,000 lines of resolution. Right now, you can only get a TV, starting to get 6K TVs, but nothing's being broadcast in that. So it'll hold up for a long time, we think, in schools and other places as we get it around to other folks. And the folks that helped me, amazing folks. One of the quick things we did was we looked at the old footage of Paradise Park. There was hardly any that was in any good shape. It was horrible. It had all kinds of mildew all over and black stuff all over, just junk. A young man, the biggest wildlife film festival in the world is in Jackson, Wyoming, and it's at the Grand Teton Lodge, and this kid at 24 beat planet Earth. He beat everybody for technical achievement. So after it was over, I talked to him and said, hey, can you look at this and see if there's anything you can do? And he did, and he goes, yeah, let me take a shot at it. So we didn't have enough money to slice his bread twice, but he spent a month on it off and on and sent it back, and it's as clean as you'll ever see it. So there were people at the first showing that were crying because they saw members of their family that they'd never seen on film. So neat stuff. All right, so we're gonna get started here in a second. This is a guy, David Connor. This is the first time brown bears were ever shot with this particular rig. It's an American camera called a red camera, and that's what we used to shoot this film with. And the red camera shoots at 6,000 lines of resolution. It also, at that point, there were only 100 in the world, and James Cameron got 50 of them. We at Geographic got one. So you keep getting reminded where the real money is, and I don't really want to go there. I want to be in the woods. I don't want a bunch of LA people yelling, running around crazy. So we're sticking with that, but that's what we do is work on films that have high resolution like that. And it is tricky because you guys are buying hard drives all the time, right? But mine are $1,000 a piece. Hurts your feelings, and that's just a couple days of shooting. Alrighty. So what we're going to do is take a look at the first little piece of film, and we're just going to cut it in sections a little bit and talk about it. If you want the complete film, Mary's got them over there, and as they mentioned earlier, a section of the quarter, 25% of that does go to help out here. The other thing that you want to recognize is that this was actually shot at a real high resolution, and this is just a regular 1080 or a regular resolution that you'd have on your home screen TV. So we want to do it one more time around town somewhere at a high resolution if we can in the next couple months. So we'll see what happens. If you guys would come see us. Last time we had 600 people show up at 2 shows. We turned people away. Don't want to do that again. We want to have popcorn for everybody. Okay, so the very beginning, all we're doing is talking about what this must have looked like 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. We don't know for sure. We know that some things aren't here. There are no red wolves in this shot. I've got some close-ups on coyotes that make it look like they're red wolves, but they're not. The black bear, he got into my blind and denned up, and I could not film out of that because he was already in it. And I was at Lake George. So other than that, we got most of them. Carolina parakeet's gone, ivory-billed woodpecker's gone, but a lot of the other critters that are around here are still here. And we've got some great folks here who have allowed us onto their big cattle ranches. The Drake Ranch has been very, very kind over many, many years. A lot of the alligator underwater stuff are done in those private springs, so we don't have to worry about somebody driving by while I'm filming underwater going, hey, what are you doing there, buddy? And you're swimming with an alligator, it's not a good moment. And you get killed by the prop, not by the gator. But in the other scheme of things, the deer footage, everything else in here, most of it's shot right at Silver Springs. Some of the deer footage, John Rudiani was very gracious about letting us go on his beautiful property there, and some of the birds, great flocks taking off, or after they did some mowing and just thousands of birds came in. So we thank those folks and all the others here. I'm sure there's plenty here that helped, and thank you a bunch. Darryl Lanker let us use a $1 million helicopter. We took the door off and stood out on the skids and flew down the Silver River. So nothing but good times. So this, the first full piece, only a couple, 3 minutes long, but it's just going to show you what it might have been like thousands of years ago. If we can dim those lights just a skosh, that'd be helpful. Any way to do that? No? All right, well, we'll just watch it the way it is.
You know, I can only imagine what Florida must have looked like thousands of years ago.
I have to thank all the critters that put up with me. What we decided to do for the opening is not have a voice of God, David Attenborough type voice over the top. They're sitting in the studio somewhere. None of them have been here. You guys have. So I wanted to just put some music over the top. Tracy Collins and myself write soundtrack for our shows, and we've done so for Geographic and many others over the years. And we have a great guy here in town who was the engineer for things like Thriller for Michael Jackson. He did 14 albums for Quincy Jones. He did, I'm trying to think, Paul McCartney, Mick Jagger, some little names like that. Barbra Streisand, and he lives right here in town. And he was nice enough to help us mix. He likes salmon, so I swapped out salmon for mixes. So there's always a way to get her done, right? And so he helped us out a whole bunch. So when you're watching films on Geographic and such, they want to have somebody right away take you into the story. And in this case, you don't want to really do that. You want the story to just talk a little bit on its own. So we're going to move on and take a look a little bit later. The most important things when you're establishing a film is to establish your characters and try to get them engaging and interesting. That's not a problem with any of these guys. If you know Oscar Collins, if you've met him for 5 minutes, you feel like you've known him your whole life. He gets off the boat after doing a show, and there's just people hugging him for the next 10 minutes. He's just an amazing guy. So real fun group of people. Each of them had their own characters, and we'll just take a look at them, see what you think.
Oh, this is beautiful. You know, you see this, you know it's real, but it's still hard to get to just believe what you see is real. That's the part with the people when they come here. It's hard to believe it.
People still come here because of this beautiful river. You know, people have gone all over the world and never seen anything so amazing before.
The clear water of Silver River is fed by rainfall that soaks into the ground from an area of over 1,300 square miles. Well, you got 7 miles here of nothing on the banks of the river. You got a pristine river flowing all the time. The most beautiful place in the world. This is what blows people's mind when they ride that glass bottom boat at Silver Spring. They can look down, see the bottom, and see the fish. They can't believe it. They really can't believe it. It's amazing to me.
Wow! Whoa! Some of them open their mouth and can't close it.
I see it, but I cannot believe it. Clearest water I ever seen. May I touch it? Can I just touch it? The water changes every 2 minutes, all day long, all night. You are the first one to ride this beautiful water. They get a kick out of that.
Yeah, they tell them sometime this is new water. You know, yesterday this water might have been many miles away.
For years, years and years, Silver Springs has been known as Silver Springs, a family attraction, and kept as natural as possible. Carl Ray and Shorty Davison made Silver Springs one of the largest tourist attractions in the country. Now, we did filter in some exotic animals and trying to keep up with the times. The legendary Ross Allen brought in snakes and crocodiles from all over the world. It was at one time one of the largest reptile exhibits anywhere.
Oh yeah, Ross Hope trained me. He would come out on the boat and he would ride with us and he would tell us, you know, the people can absorb only so much. You don't want to just talk all the time. You want to give them a chance to talk among themselves. And we would be quiet and then he'd ride so far and say, well, now it's time for the captain to kick in and say something. So we would find something interesting along the shoreline to talk about and start back talking again.
But if you talk to the people when they start out of the gate, the thing they was interested in was this river, the clarity of the water, and the way that nature had been left alone.
Oh, I hope I see plenty of fish and turtles. People love those. That makes my job much easier. I mean, you can get their attention in a minute if you say, there's a turtle. Boy, everybody's looking.
And of course, you know, we have a variety of fish here. Some say 32, but I can't go to 32, so I'm gonna say a few. We have the bass, we have mullet, boarfin, sunfish, panfish. You catch a batch, I cook them, we'll call them fried fish.
This area that we're floating over now at the present time is what we used to call the old Catfish Hotel. It's where we had the football games between the Catfish and the Brim.
We'd wad up this big bread ball and put out there, and that's what we'd call a fish football game. And bluegill brim was the Army, and the blue catfish was the Navy, and the Navy always won. put this big ball out there and they bounce it around. Pretty soon a big catfish come get it, hold it in his mouth, and away he go. Well, I was always a lover of the fish. You know, that was my main thing. But there was times when there was more birds along the river, like limpkin cranes. We had a lot of those, and they would hatch out and have babies, and we lost those when they lost our apple snails. And now they look like the snail population is starting to come back a little bit, and I'm seeing 1 or 2 limpkins showing back up. That's a good thing.
This area of the river that we're sitting in now, this is what we always known on the river as the old original Tarzan location. That's back in the days when Johnny Weissmuller played Tarzan. The natural look of the swampland and this clear water is what attracted all of the film and television productions to Silver Springs. You see how big these trees are. If you notice, the cypress trees don't have any small limbs on them until they get almost to the very top. So years ago, one of these bigger cypress fell in the river, and one came down and was leaning over it. Well, Johnny Weissmuller, who played Tarzan back in those days, would come out of the swamp, run up on the tree, dive into the water, and then the underwater cameraman had a perfect shot in this clear water of Johnny swimming upstream against the current.
They most would love to see the big spring, the main spring, where they made all the movies, especially with Sea Hunt, Lloyd Bridges, and the statues on I Spy, you know, what Bill Cosby, the main spring.
I enjoyed the days when they was filming Sea Hunt with Lloyd Bridges. He was a real great guy. You know, sometime he'd come by the break room, say hello, and just an all-around guy. And he came back later on and did a commercial for us.
Glass spotter boats. They'll take you over the largest freshwater springs in the world. Just one more reason why you've got to visit Silver Springs. Look, did you see that?
First one I ever worked on was Sea Hunt. A buddy of mine that worked here, Roy Carpenter, the company come in ahead of time and wanted divers. They were going to pay $100 a day for a diver. Back then, that was big money. And Roy, we didn't know how to dive, but we made our mind up we were going to teach ourselves how to dive, and we did. And they hired us. So that's the first one I worked on was Sea Hunt. Between television and the movies, I don't know, probably 75 to 100.
So many of them that I don't forget the name, a lot of them, but you know, with the James Bonds and Moonraker and Jackie Gleason and Smoking the Bandit.
Bring it on, brother! Are you sure you know what the hell you're doing?
I was here doing Smoking the Bandit Part 3. And they destroyed so much of the river at that time. You know, ABC said that's enough of that. You know, we won't be doing any shooting anymore. It was just the speed was just excessive, you know, for this area, and it just destroyed a lot of the vegetation along the waterway.
The guy is a maniac!
So a couple things. One is when you're establishing characters and doing all these things, this is a film we're talking about a little bit, is about the anatomy of how you make a film. And it's not a science. You have to try to feel when you want to do things. You notice we had a little bird scene there, it got real quiet. Hey, it's getting musical out here. And nowadays, anything quiet gets you a little nervous, doesn't it? I mean, you usually hear big cellos going or something bad's getting ready to happen. But if something gets quiet, it gets your attention. And so right after that, of course, Tarzan did his yell, and off you go. But in reality, a lot of these films, we are being pulled around a little bit. A lot of times we would lead someone to say something, and I didn't want to do that with glass bottom boat drivers. What we wanted to do was say, what is it that you love here? What makes you get up in the morning and say, I want to go do that again? And so all the animals that we used in here were the ones they recommended, not what I wanted or not what, I mean, there's whole great stories about Newt Perry and some of the great people that are here. A lot of those guys were gone by the time these glass bottom boat drivers got here 60 years ago. So they weren't part of their story. So when you hear this story, we're not ignoring some of these people. They just weren't part of what they saw every day and what they did every day. The other thing is, we don't realize how monumentally important Silver Springs is, and still it was back then, for filming. One, if you film in salt water all the time, and some of you have, you go down and you do your shark trips and you do all these really cool trips in salt water, what are you doing in the evening? You are cleaning your gear, right? Salt water corrodes everything. Silver River has tape grass or eelgrass. It looks just like a lot of the places that you would see in salt water. So, well, there's many springs around Florida. Why don't you use them? Well, they used Ocala, Weeki Wachee, and Silver Springs majority of the time. They're big enough. You could put a crew underwater. You had a lot of room at the head spring of Silver Springs. That cave is 84, 85 feet long. And I've done a test to the top, and it's about 35 feet deep. So you're only one atmosphere. You don't have to clear. You don't have to work on your dive skills at 200 or 300 feet. Water penetration, light penetration is great, all the way to the bottom. That's a huge thing without having to set up huge light setups underwater, which we have done. We did a Navy SEAL shoot there, and the SEALs came in. They had just been active in Afghanistan, one of them from Iraq, and the four of them, actually, I knew friends of theirs, and we had a great shoot that night. We took Mylar, put it 70 feet across the bottom of Silver Springs, a huge piece of it, tacked it down with lead weights. Put the largest light in the southeast that we could find, is about this big, onto the largest crane we could find, and lower it over top of the whole scene. So the bottom of Silver River at night just is gorgeous lit up like that. You have God rays of light coming through with the particulate in the water. The next thing we did was got an 8-foot alligator, and I swam it in front of him. And as we're swimming along, you would just let go of it and have a 100-pound test line tied to the tip of his tail. So as it got close to the camera, you could just put a little bit of pressure on it, and what it looked like was the seals moving along and the gator moving out of their way and going right to the camera. So this all worked great, and about 12 o'clock at night, we broke for lunch. That was our dinner, it was in the middle of the night, and came back. The guy said, well, get that shot. Let's do one that get out of there a little quicker, Mark, so we can make a shorter version of it. And so I just said, guys, if I kick right away, and I don't know if y'all don't know my ugly past, but I kickboxed on the ESPN circuit when I was younger, so I can kick. Even with Navy SEALs, I'm right in there. So I was chasing down alligators at night, so I can swim pretty fast. And so I told them, guys, if I kick out quicker, I'm going to whack somebody, and I don't want to make, they all had guns. They had underwater weapons. They had scooters. I was dead if they wanted me. They're mad at me. So I kicked out a little faster, and I felt it thump somebody. They told me before I did it, they said, hey, look, we're in dirty water all the time. We hit each other. It's, tanks hit people, blah, blah, blah. We're used to it, no problem. Well, 3 times in a row, I whacked somebody. And the next time I looked down, there was a gun barrel sticking between my legs. And I pressed my button. We all went to the top. I said, y'all something y'all want to talk about? And I said, we're just letting you know exactly how close we are. So I behaved myself the rest of the night, and we got it all done. But they were wonderful, wonderful gentlemen, and we had a great time doing that. But that's who it attracts. The one picture, the black and white of Mr. Ray and Shorty Davidson, the other guy in that picture was the President of the United States, Calvin Coolidge, at that time. So that's who came through Silver Springs. It goes all the way back into the 1800s with people coming of royalty from England and such coming up the river. So it has attracted people for a long, long time. That's how valuable the Silver River is. Basically, you're looking at the Grand Tetons underwater. I mean, we get to see it through a glass bottom boat, but if you get on the bottom and look around, it's stunning. It really is great. I'm wearing this funny little hat. I do have good parents. They told me you don't wear a cap inside. I've ignored a lot of what they said over the years. But that is a dive crew of all of us that get together and clean the statues. We just did it Sunday. And once a month, we go in there and get to dive underwater in Silver Springs. They don't let anybody else dive there other than film crews now. So it's a neat deal. One of the things and Virginia will tell you, when people come to Silver Springs, they want to see an alligator. And people sometimes even now get to see alligators under the glass swimming. And it's an amazing sight because everything above water means they're ungainly. People talk about them running as fast as a deer. I've outwalked them on the ground many, many times. That's not true. But underwater, this is the man. I mean, they are incredible underwater. One particular thing, I was with a friend of mine, Tom Fitz, who did Blue Planet and some of the really big films on whales, great swimmer. We went around behind an alligator who was obviously defensively aggressive, is the fancy word for one that's just ticked off. He's sitting at the top of the first spring on the right when you come in, and he's 12 feet long. And there are not many true 12-footers anymore. People will tell you they saw one, but when you get one in the head looks like that underwater, you know. Anyway, he's sitting up on the top, and he's waiting on another alligator to come in that spring and try to take it away from him. So we knew enough to get on there. What you do is get down low and get on the bottom, and then come on around behind. And so now we have the light the way we want it, and the action should happen right in front of us. Well, it did, but about a 9-footer came just cruising into the spring. I don't even know if he knew he was there. When an alligator gets ready to strike or does anything really aggressive, he'll inflate. So his body comes up like that, and underwater you could see him just going. Now he has clearance. He has less drag on the water because his body's higher up. And when that other gator came in, he exploded on him and took off. If we had scooters to chase him with, our masks would have come off. That's how fast he was chasing him. So underwater, an alligator is king. And so we love our gators. If you go to the football games, you probably know just before the game they have the chomp. And we shot all that right here. You know, I shot that with the same cameras we shot this with. I'm sorry about that for the FSU fans. It's just been a tough year all the way around. All right, so we're going to take a little bit of a look at alligators, and Virginia's going to help us out.
So you just never know what you're going to see. But when every guest comes to Silver Spring, pretty much is looking for an alligator.
Gator's an amazing thing to watch. Over the years, working with different film crews and then working with the Ross Allen Reptile Institute with Ross himself when he owned it, we did a lot of underwater stuff on filming alligators because Ross was well known for that, of course. With that membrane that they have over their eyes that they can roll it down when they're underwater where they don't get water in their eyes. And they can't see real good, of course. They'll be swimming along, they're swimming to a log, or they'll swim right into the camera lens a lot of times. And you get you somebody that's never worked with alligators and that gator come up and bumps that camera lens, he thinks he's in serious trouble. He don't know that alligator can't see it. He's gonna go around him or back off or whatever.
You know, really and truly, I've read, you know, where alligators only stay under the water approximately about an hour, but that's not true. Here at Silver Springs, I've seen them here half a day.
I have seen them about an hour. I've made a couple of trips and come back and the alligator's still on the bottom, especially during the wintertime because the water's more warmer than outside.
Sometimes they're just there. And sometimes you'll see them every now and then, they'll try and get a fish.
I see alligators sometimes, they'll feed on those birds, and once in a while they'll feed on a turtle. They'll be real hungry before they eat a turtle.
And the gator's not going to just run up there and grab you to start with if you don't bother him. Now, if you get in his territory, especially a female when she's nesting, you better be able to run, because she's going to give you a run for your money.
She's not going to let anybody, even Dad, near her babies. I was trying to point out, I was driving Fort King, and I was just backed out from the dock going around Spider Monkey Island. And over on the right there on Shoreline, there was a mama with the babies, you know, and usually the baby's on the back. And I tried to get close enough so everybody could see, which was a mistake. Because when I got a little too close, Mama forgot about babies on the back and all. Now, she didn't jump on the boat, but she jumped behind the boat. And everybody back there near me was just as muddy as they could be. Scared me to death. Never try that again, okay? Don't ever try that.
Can Virginia tell a story or what? She's amazing. Just a wonderful lady. And she always kept track of all the boat drivers and when they were supposed to be there at the right time. They miss her terribly out there right now. As far as just the idea of what we know about alligators, a lot of it comes from Silver Springs. We've done a number of films there, probably 15 or 18, where we're working with alligators underwater. And I'll have the head of, Kent Vliet. He's the top biologist at the University of Florida for alligator studies, and he is at the Archie Carr building, the big building. He's the head biologist of that whole bunch. And I'll come up and tell him something I saw underwater, and he's like, we don't know that. I said, I got it on film, brother. We do know it now. They'll do all kinds of things. So it's been a great place, and Ross was key to all that. To give you an idea how big Ross was in his day, all of us knew when we grew up here that he was the crocodile hunter of the world at that time. He had brought every species of croc to his reptile institute from all over the place, and many, many other different amphibians and all kinds of different kinds of reptiles. I'm in Venezuela in 1996 or 7. Chavez just took over. Fun, happy place to be, right? We had to carry thousands of dollars on us because they wouldn't let us use American credit cards anymore. So we're walking time bombs of, $10,000 in tiny bills, and it cost you, $500 to buy a hamburger at lunch or what. It was crazy, crazy time to be there. We're doing a scout for National Geographic, so we find the guy. Down there they had big ranches, and some of you may know that some of these big properties here are actually parts of old Spanish land grants. Well, some of the ones in Venezuela are still in one piece, so they're bigger than the King Ranch. They're gigantic. And people go to church there, they go to school there, they stay on the property their whole life. And so I was lucky enough to have several of those people to be able to talk to about this crocodile that we were going to study. The Orinoco River croc is probably the largest croc in North and South America. Got to 19 feet historically. Somebody would one guy had one in his house, the kids would lean up against it and watch TV, okay? Whatever. We find some strange things when we work on these stories. So I was lucky enough to meet the guy who had one of these giant hatas, Hata El Frio. Some of these are just giant places. And I get to talking to him, and he says, Mark, where are you from? And I said, well, a little town. I lived in Ocala at the time. He said, right near Silver Springs. He said, oh, did you know Ross Allen? I mean, we're on the Llanos, hundreds of miles back into the property off of Caracas. We're not anywhere a big city. And this guy knows Ross. And I said, well, yeah, I know Ross. He still owes me $20. He goes, he's been dead for 10 years. I said, well, yeah, I'm Presbyterian. I'm going to wait on it. So he said, you come into the house. So their house was not a regular house. As you can imagine, somebody like that. It's almost like a fiefdom, where they have a huge property like that. So we go into the house, and there's a book like maybe the old family Bibles where you had some gold encrusted stuff. And you open that up, and it's a registry of everybody who's visited his property. And here's Ross's name from the year I was born, 1954. Like, holy mackerel. So what was he doing here? And he said, well, he was catching anacondas right over here, and he took us to the place where he had been catching anacondas. And so that's the kind of Ocala, Silver Springs. it has a big, gigantic reach that we don't even know about, even today. I mean, there's a lot of folks, if I go to other parts of the world, isn't that place they did this, this, and this? There was some Tom Cruise films shot here. There's all kinds of things shot here. And people know about it. So it's just getting reintroduced to other folks again. We want to get the right folks in here. We've had the folks from Planet Earth in here several times. I'm talking to them about coming again and doing some more work with us. And they did one film called North America, and we shot that there, and Tom Selleck did the narration. So he mentioned my name somewhere in it, and my wife said, Tom Selleck just said your name on TV. I'm going, I did 13 days underwater, 24 days above water, and Tom gets all this stuff. It's just never going to work out. Some of the things are gone from Silver Springs. There was a little tiny flounder when we were a kid. It was that big. We used to play with him right underneath where the everybody jumped off the high dive. We used to historically had all kinds of animals that are missing now, but some things are coming back. And one of the things that absolutely Leon loves, and I took him out not too long ago, and we just looked at deer all day long, and he and his wife Betty had a great time. But he loves white-tailed deer, and so we're going to let him talk about that a little bit.
The chicklins, and we might see deer along the waterway.
We've seen bucks and does and young fawns. That's a beautiful sight also. People love that.
Both sides of this river, Silver River, is lots of white-tailed deer, lots of them. Some of the bucks get 8, 10, I've seen a few 13-point bucks. And some of them is a light fawn colored, some of them's a real dark brown color. And the ones that's the real dark brown, they're the ones that live mostly closer to the river swamp. They don't get as much sun and all as what the other deer gets. They're really a beautiful deer. Of course, the babies, when they're spotted, the fawns. In the fall, you'd be surprised how the white-tailed deer just love to fight. And when they fight, they just lock the antlers together and just twist and turn and fight for hours sometimes. Especially when he starts rutting, his neck will swell up, and then when it's mating season, he'll chase the does like all other animals do. He'll follow a certain doe for hours until the time's right. I mean, he don't give up. He just keeps on going. I've noticed in these woods, particularly around the Silver Springs area and the swamp area, that the deer are gradually starting to come back into the area. And I've noticed over the last 3 years, or maybe a little longer, that the herd is gradually coming back up, which that's a good thing that they're doing on both sides of this river. They don't allow any hunting of any kind, and the natural vegetation is coming back for the animals.
Thank you. As far as the buck fighting thing, I've seen that twice in 14 years of filming it. It's not very lucky. It's very, very lucky to get open country, and that's why it was so great to be able to work at John's and some of the other places around here, because the right at Silver Springs, there are some really big bucks living up in there, and some of those shots in there are at Silver Springs, but you're going to get a window about that big, and then it gets thick again, and you can't see them. So the floodplain for that's another word for it, actually. Spring shed is the proper term for Silver Springs. Is 1,300 square miles. So this water's coming in from all over for that area. And a lot of the animals in that spring shed are considerably larger and in better shape than other parts of Florida because of all this rich habitat here. One other thing that's happened here is that some surprises are coming back. One, as you probably know if you're interested in wildlife, is that we had the best manatee year last year that we've had in a long time. 6,000 manatees were counted. Quick manatee story. I did a film years ago for BBC on how man and animals actually help each other at times. And one of the things they did is down at Stewart is they put in a hot water discharge canal the manatees could go in instead of pumping the water way out in the ocean and let it pop up out there. They just left it warm right by the building. And 419 manatees came in one year. I don't know who the person is who goes, there's 42, 40, whatever. They were able somehow, the BBC was, to get us permission to dive there. It was crazy because every one of them is 1,200 to 1,500 pounds. If they spook, you're going to get mowed over by, it's just going to be a big mess of spam when they're done with me. So the guy I was with was a biologist. He said, we've never let anybody dive here with a camera before, just do Zen-like stuff, hardly moving. I said, don't worry, brother, I've got it. I'm just going to snorkel, no scuba, no nothing. I just went in there and filmed with him. So about 9:30 or 10 o'clock, I'm getting dizzy. Now, I don't get seasick. I've been in boats my whole life, been out on the ocean all the time, 18 years on a fishing show. I mean, done tons of underwater, and I'm getting dizzy. Like, what in the world? I'm in 15 feet of water. There's no way. I get out, and he's already out. He'd been out for 20 minutes. I said, Dave, what in the world's going on? He goes, I couldn't believe you lasted that long. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, about 10 o'clock, they all passed gas. You're on a snorkel, and you're breathing pure methane from 419 of your best friends. That's just nasty. I apologize, but that's what happened. So our little show here next is just a little short piece, but Virginia loves manatees. Had to put them in for her, and she's going to tell you about her manatee stuff. And then we'll go on a little bit from there. As far as manatees in the Silver River, we don't know exactly where they came from. There are certainly people that are talking about people letting them through some of the locks down in different parts of the river. They are showing up in unusual places. If you ever wade fished Lake George and you had a gator kind of following you around, and all of a sudden a manatee came up behind you, went, all the hair on the back of your neck would run right on. You look like a punk rocker in about 2 seconds. All right, we'll take a look at these guys though.
And truly, of all the years I've been here, it took me 40 years, guys, actually to see the first manatee. And in the last year and a half, I've seen over 15, which is very, very amazing. Very amazing. It's so different, and you really never know when you're going to see a manatee.
They'd been seen on the river back in the 50s and 40s, back in them days, but they weren't plentiful. It was very seldom. I understand now that they're seeing them quite often up and down the river, which is a great thing. I can remember the first time I ever saw one. He was sort of long, but big around. Had a head and had a big lip, I guess you'd say, sticking out over the front, And I thought, my goodness alive, that's some kind of creature, you know. And then I was telling my dad about it, and he had seen them, you know, years before that too. And he said, well, they're called sea cows or manatees. He said they live mostly off of the hyacinths and bonnets and stuff along the river, and feed along the bottom of the river. But they probably get up 1,500, maybe 2,000 pounds. I know when I first saw one, how it surprised me. And I can imagine a young child now seeing a manatee. They would think it was an elephant that swims on the water or something, you know, the size of it and the color of it. But they're actually a neat looking animal.
Everybody looks forward for the manatees. Everybody jumps when the manatees come into the springs. And of course, to me, I run and get everybody out their shops, you know. All of the cooks and everybody else want to see a manatee. So really, we have a lot of excitement here on the boat dock sometimes. It's exciting for the guests, and of course, it's always exciting for us. I have a lot of respect for Leon. Not only was he a supervisor, but Leon wouldn't ask you to do anything he wouldn't do. You know, if we were busy, if we had 22 boats on the waterway, 17, whatever we had out here, we was running short, Leon would come out the woods. He's a guy that liked the woods. So he was out looking for deer and goats and all this stuff, but he would come out the woods in his brogans, jeans, and jump right on the boat and help us till we got out of the wood, you know, out of the woods. I mean, we couldn't break the line.
I was born and raised on the Ocala River, just below where the Silver River and the Ocala River comes together. That's where we lived. Back in those days, Silver River and Ocala River, a lot of people made their living off of the river, catching the big catfish, selling them to the fish markets, gigging or hand catching the bullfrogs, catching snakes, catching turtles, all of that. Because boy, back in them days, that Ocala River was full of fish. Brim, catfish, especially big bass. Man, there's some bass coming there like 8, 10, 12-pound bass sometimes they bring back up to the landing. Silver River is 7 miles long. It goes into the Ocala. Then the Ocala goes into the St. Johns. Then the St. Johns goes into the Atlantic Ocean. You got to remember now, when the old boats run up the river, there were different places along the river that the boats would pull into. And the people would bring their vegetables, their crops from their farms to the river and load them on the boats. And then they'd go up, back, take them all the way back to Jacksonville and sell them at the markets. It was definitely a livelihood for a lot of people. Of course, in the woods, you know, we could go out and hunt the wild hogs, hunt the turkey, hunt the deer. Back in those days, there was no houses or mobile homes or anything. It was all privately owned on both sides. And we used to hunt turkeys, especially over on the north side of the river, we would hunt turkeys. Spring gobbler season, that's when the turkeys are doing their strutting, doing the yakking, you know, talking to each other. I used to like going and just sit down and just listen to them talk back and forth. You get down there early in the mornings, turkeys like to roost up in the trees up high, especially over water. But they are one beautiful bird, especially during spring gobbling season. They're beautiful. Get that tail and spread it out. Oh, they're out of this world. But the main thing that we really enjoy hunting, of course, was the wild hogs. That's the best meat in the world, that wild hog.
If there was a captain to retire, you know, there were wild hogs always captured and cooked and roasted or however you, but he was just that type of fellow. I've just always liked working with Leon, I really did, always, always.
Well, you know, once again, working at Silver Springs, it don't matter whether it's black or whether it's white. That didn't have anything to do with it. We all worked as a family. And now that we're all getting older and we're starting to retire and go on our separate ways, there's about 4 of us that we call each other at least once a month and check in with each other to make sure that we're doing good. And we still, if we can, they need help, we help them. And they help us. The section here across in front of us that we're floating by now, this was Paradise Park. This was an area that Mr. Ray and Davison built years ago, back for the black folks to have the glass bottom boat ride, reptile shows, gift shop, and this whole front side here, this was the swimming beach. And there was a big platform that came out into the water that they could dive off of.
It was a good place. It was a beautiful park. As a matter of fact, Paradise Park blending in with the type of scenery we have better than Silver Springs does up here.
Yeah, for that part, it was more beautiful than up here. I'm serious. It was a beautiful park. You had everything you wanted.
There is hardly no black person you can talk to within a 300-mile radius that didn't go to Paradise Park. Paradise Park was something to see. To us, like everybody came all over the world here to see Silver Springs, there were buses from all over the world that came to Paradise Park. Everybody looked forward to Labor Day because Labor Day was the day that they had the beauty contest. And you would have girls from all over Florida come in here to compete during the beauty contest.
The pageant, the beauty pageant, the big Easter egg hunt on Monday. Oh man, it was something else. All the churches went there. You know, those people baptized down there on Easter, have all that going on. It was something, it was something.
You know, it is what it is. And I came up during those days, and we, as blacks, you know, if you didn't have, you didn't have. You know, we was able to really, really cope with whatever we had. You know, in Paradise Park was what we had, and we loved it.
At the present time, there's a canal between this land and the other land, but up on the hill, on the other side of the canal, that's where the gift shop was. That's where the reptile shows was put on. They had a big dance pavilion. They had a big barbecue place, volleyball courts, everything. And they had the glass bottom boats. They had the jungle cruise boats and the reptile shows. All of it went on here, what they call Paradise Park.
You live with the times that you're in. You know, it wasn't a comfortable feeling, but that was the time that we was living in. So we just accepted that. But looking back on it, it wasn't a good thing because it had people divided.
Of course, I guess I really never really been bitter because I was taught to adapt to what I had. But to walk back there now to see what Paradise Park is like compared to what it was, yeah, it's devastating. It is really devastating.
You know, history is not always pretty. Sometimes it leaves scars.
Coming into Silver Springs my first day was very exciting because the eelgrass here in the river was just as green as any plant that you see along the river here at this time, which is our springtime. You could back out from the #1 slip and you would drop off a ledge and you would drop from 17 to 31. And you know, by the time you said, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen," We're going to take a sheer drop here from 17 to 31. By the time you dropped off that ledge and put the boat in forward and came over the eelgrass was so pretty when the sun hit it, you couldn't say anything else.
When I first came here, we would advertise a 1-hour trip on the glass bottom. We would go way down about where Paradise Park used to be. And then we cut it to 45 minutes, and then from 45 minutes to 30 minutes. But mainly because of the scenery. We were seeing fewer fish and less wildlife and everything to keep the people engaged. So we started cutting it back the way we could halfway keep the people excited for the period of time that we had them out. I would say we start seeing more algae back in the 70s, late 60s, and it just kept growing. And the fish population start leaving us, you know, back in those days. If they can reverse the algae, I think that we'll be heading back upstream again. But if they don't get control of the algae, I think we're drifting downstream again.
I know that the things that my children and some of my children have enjoyed along the Silver River, my great-grands will never be able to enjoy. You know, with the algae along the waterway and the purity and the flow of the water now, you know, we have less flow than we had years ago. And coming in the door 44 years ago, the mainspring produced 550 million gallons every 24 hours. Now I've been told there is less than 400 million gallons of water is produced daily out of the mainspring. It's a bit scary. It's a bit scary.
This is the real Florida. And as long as we take care of it and look after it, it'll be here for our grandchildren and their children to see. But we're gonna have to wise up in some areas and look at what we're doing and start improving on what we're doing. Silver Springs was the #1, besides my wife and my church, #1. I love it.
My mother is passed and gone, but she always would tell me, say, son, I worry sometimes. I don't know what you'll do if they get rid of these glass bottom boats. She's dead and gone now, my mother. But she knew it's about all I ever did for many years.
This is my home. Silver Springs is my home. I spend more time here than I do at my house. There are mornings, you know, you might not be old enough yet where you go to Dragon a little bit, but once you move around and get here, boy, can't nothing stop you.
And it's every day, it's something, it's different. You can come down here 7 days a week, which I've done years and years in a row, 7 days a week, all hours of the day, all hours of the night. It's never the same, never the same, always constantly different. You don't hear nothing but monkeys in the woods jumping from palm tree to palm tree, fish jumping, a frog croaking, bird chirping, or whatever, you know, things like that. And you can't get that any other place. And it's all natural. None of this is man-made, none of it. Look out and see all the big cypress knees, these big cypress trees that's hundreds and hundreds years old. There's no way to beat it, no way. I mean, all these doctors you want to talk about, go to and talk to, and they'll straighten you out and all this stuff, you know. You come out and take you a ride on Silver River or float down Silver River. You won't need a doctor. Everything will be clear. Your head will be washed plumb clean.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming.
Now let's please give Mark Emery an amazing hand. What a fan.
Thank you guys.
I'm going to throw this to you. Are you ready?
Mark, forgive me for putting you on the spot, but over the years I've seen Mary and I'd say, "Where's Mark?" and she'd say, "Editing, editing, editing, editing." Is there any way you've put a pencil to the number of hours you put in putting this together?
Well, what we do initially is as the shots come in, we shorten them all. So there's a short, quick edit then. I have no idea on that. This, as an edit, I had an editor who did some of the best music videos in the country for the last 10 years. He drove from Orlando to my house for 3 months every day, and we edited it.
Every day.
I can't believe it. His name is Drew Russ. He's in the credits going by.
Thank you for your devotion and your vision, Mark.
Oh,
thank
well,
you.
Thank you, but I thank you for Drew Russ. I couldn't have done it by
Questions?
myself.
Any other questions here for Mark?
Oh, good. That's easy.
Okay, that's easy.
We'll be up here for a few
you're
minutes.
off the hook.
I must have said too much
I
already.
know, or something. Oh my gosh.
Thank you, guys.